Mothers and housewives are the only workers who do not have regular time off. But how can we find wholeness in a life of mothering that seems to require us to be so torn? We think restoration means checking out, but sometimes it means checking in deeply to what is ours. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Down the Well. You guys, I've written this episode and rewritten this episode like 5 times in the past few months because it really hit at something deep for me that I've been trying to figure out. So I'd write and research, and then I'd stop, and then something would happen in my life that would make me think of it completely differently and reframe it all. And I'm like, okay, I got to go back at it again. So I'd add on and kind of debate with myself within the script. And it happened like 3 or 4 times where I landed feels like total transformation, total reframing for me. And I'm so thrilled to share it with you and to hear your thoughts as well. Okay, so let's go on this journey together where I explore fragmentation versus wholeness in motherhood. I don't know if that rings familiar for you, but it does for me. Self-care versus sacrifice, these kind of polarities that we hold in motherhood. Okay, so imagine I'm on a plane to Hawaii a few months ago. I'm rereading a favorite book. It's called Gifts of the Sea. It's about motherhood, womanhood. It's by Ann Morrow Lindbergh. I don't know if you've read it. If not, you should. It's a good one. It's timeless. And shout out to Karen Roner for giving it to me after I had my 4th baby. She's a mom and a grandma that I really look up to. But Ann Morrow Lindbergh wrote this book on mothering from a little beach cottage where she'd escape to every summer. I mean, she had something figured out already. We know that, right? So I'm feeling very on theme on the plane, except that, we stayed at a Courtyard Marriott instead of a little beach cottage. I brought 5 people with me instead of going solo, but I'm still, trying to set the stage for my trip mentally, spiritually, when this quote stops me in my tracks. I'd read it before, but it just hit different today, okay? She said, "Woman's life today is tending more and more toward the state William James describes so well in the German word Zerrissenheit, torn to pieceshood. She cannot live perpetually in Zerrissenheit. She will be shattered into 1,000 pieces." Oh my gosh, yes. Does that word ever feel true? Torn to pieceshood. It just hit me in the gut. In this moment, coming off of the end of the school year, crazy, overwhelmed by some things going on with work and friends, I planned this trip to Hawaii on a whim for our family just a few weeks before because I was feeling torn to pieceshood myself. And I wanted to escape and make some core memories before my oldest started her junior year. And I just wanted to fall asleep on the beach and do nothing for a week. Like I kept thinking about that Humpty Dumpty song. I was like, I've fallen off a wall and I wanted to be put back together again. So Hawaii, please do that. Most of us saw our own mothers in this state of Zerrissenheit at some point, and we see women around us right now there. We've been there. Maybe you are there. I know I have been, and I am witnessing it all around me, making it no surprise that fewer people are opting into marriage, by the way, or motherhood, or even adulthood. Ann Morrow Lindbergh was writing about this in 1955? So this is definitely not new. And you'd be hard-pressed to convince me this problem has gotten better for women since her writing. Like I said, I've read this book several times before, but it's hitting different this time. So now I'm gripping the pages of this book like my life depends on it. I'm like, okay, Ann, so what's the antidote? What's the opposite of Zerrissenheit or being torn or fragmented? I think we could say it's wholeness, right? But how can we find wholeness in a life of mothering that seems to require us to be so torn, to carry multiple identities, wear so many different hats, spin so many plates, take on so many roles? Like that just feels like synonymous with motherhood, right? So now Anne gives us the antidote. Let's finish the quote. "She cannot live perpetually in Zerrissenheit. She will be shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the contrary, she must consciously encourage those pursuits which oppose the centrifugal forces of today. And hold on, centrifugal forces moving or tending away from the center, the things that pull us from our center. It's not so good. Quiet time alone, contemplation, prayer, music, a centering line of thought or reading, of study or work. It can be physical or intellectual or artistic, any creative life proceeding from oneself. It need not be an enormous project or a great work, but it should be something of one's own. So, I like this answer. I'm raising the roof on the plane, or in my mind, at least. I'm all in. Her answer connects with what I already know, everything I've already talked about do you remember the episode 3 in season 1, Self-Care That Really Cares? Talking about things that nourish the mind, body, and spirit is real self-care, not distraction, but real replenishment and restorative care. This is where Ann Morrow Lindbergh makes a connection that helped me visualize why this matters so clearly. She writes, even purposeful giving must have some source that refills it. The milk in the breast must be replenished by food taken into the body. If you have breastfed a baby, you know that is true. You need all the drinks and a lot of food. You have to constantly replenish yourself to be able to feed that baby. It's like the most beautiful metaphor for us physically to feed our babies, and yet it is so hard to do in all the other areas of my life. In all the other areas of our lives. But what I love the most from that quote is the word source. Like, think about it in all caps with lights on it, source. I know I've talked a lot on this show about sacrifice, making things sacred, that we don't need to be afraid of giving freely to wear ourselves out in the well-doing, and that leaning into that spirit is at the heart of our mother's heroes' journeys of our transformation, living out that mother archetype and finding meaning and connection, all leading us to wholeness. But all of that giving has to have a source, and that source must be nurtured and cared for. That's where self-care comes from. What are we caring for? We're caring for source. Your source. So what is your source? What fills you up? What feeds your spirit? What centers you? Where is the spring that when full, everything else flows from? What aligns you with the divine? How are you giving it to yourself, and how often? Now, Ann takes it a step further. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm not hooting and hollering on the plane. But in my mind, again, I'm just like so excited. Just underlining still is really all that I'm doing, but I am really excited. This is where I got really inspired. She writes, by and large, mothers and housewives are the only workers who do not have regular time off. If women were convinced that a day off or an hour of solitude was a reasonable ambition, they would find a way of attaining it. The artist knows he must be alone to create, the writer to work out his thoughts, the musician to compose, the saint to pray. But women need solitude in order to find again the true essence of themselves, that firm strand which will be the indispensable center of a whole web of human relationships. Are you kidding me? I mean, I love how logically she puts it there. We have not made the connection clear enough that rest restores us. That if we want to be the mothers that we want to be, it requires some solitude, some to feed that source. It is what enables us to give. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. We're losing our spirits in the endless giving and giving without the refilling. In our giving, we can become too untethered, drift away from our centers, which is our source, our life force, and I believe my connection and alignment with God and my highest self. We're in a perpetual state of torn to pieces hood, and we will eventually lose ourselves if we don't tend to source. I was just talking with a close friend who's really struggling, and I mentioned this word to her of Zerrissenheit, of torn to pieces hood, and she just started sobbing. She's like, that is how I feel. And if you backtrack how she got to that place, it is from giving and never tending to source. That is not something for her to beat herself up about, but there needs to be a moment of awareness that you cannot give from an empty well. She's going to have to stop and find, maybe she will have to fight for it, probably, but she will have to find a way to feed that source, to refill it. I had my own wild moment of realization a few weeks ago that I wanted to share as well. So I have this Aura ring that tracks my sleep and stress levels and all kinds of stuff. And I noticed that my stress levels were like kind of off the charts all the time. And I almost never made it down to the next levels of like engaged, relaxed, or restored unless I was asleep, which was really surprising to me because I hadn't felt stress. I'm like, this is just me. I don't know. So trying to follow my own advice. I mean, I got stressed about the stress level and I tried to follow my own advice here. And I took a few days off to the mountains to feed my source. All, necessary research for this episode before school started. And so I did this a few weeks ago before school started, and I did almost nothing other than like light exercise and walking. And I was interested to see what activities would bring me into the restorative zone, but everything I did seemed to make it worse. And I found myself in the stress zone like anytime I wasn't asleep again. And I'm like, I'm not even stressed, except that now I'm just stressed about my stress level. So I kind of quit relaxing by the beginning of the third day, and I decided instead to work on this episode. Ironically, I got so into the zone of writing that I didn't even check my ring for several hours. But when I did, I was shocked to find that I hit all three: engaged, relaxed, and restored while I was writing. I instantly thought of Ann's prescription: quiet time alone, contemplation, prayer, music, a centering line of thought or of reading, of study or work. And it can be, remember, she says it can be physical or intellectual or artistic, any creative life proceeding from oneself. It just needs to be your own. It's going to look different for everybody. I had found my own centering line of work, that was my own, and truly fed my source and brought those torn to pieces back together. And I didn't even need another nap, you guys. I just needed my own work. So to find this kind of wholeness and avoid being torn to pieces, should we give less? Should we resist any fragmentation, just like constantly putting up guardrails around us? Maybe sometimes, but I don't think that's always the answer. I don't want to keep my life at arm's length of fear of being shattered, right? I want to live wholeheartedly and in deep connection and service to others. A personal hero of mine, Marjorie Hinckley, she once said, I don't want to drive up to the pearly gates in a shiny sports car wearing beautifully tailored clothes, my hair expertly coiffed with long, perfectly manicured fingernails. I want to drive up in a station wagon that has mud on the wheels from taking kids to scout camp. I want to be there with a smudge of peanut butter on my shirt from making sandwiches for a sick neighbor's children. I want to be there with a little dirt under my fingernails from helping weed someone's garden. I want to be there with children's sticky kisses on my cheeks and the tears of a friend on my shoulder. I want the Lord to know I was really here and that I really lived. Whew, I don't know about you, but I am with Marjorie. I want a lived in, not just looked at life, which is increasingly becoming the norm, which naturally leads to more disconnection in our relationships and with ourselves. I do like having my nails done and I do like clothes, but overall, I really am into that quote. Okay, like Lisa Marchiano said on the show last season, remember, she said, getting used up is kind of the point of this life. And yet, in order to get used up or to make our sacrifices sacred, to give purposefully, not just running on an endless hamster wheel, we have to feed our source. So how do we get in right relationship with being torn to pieceshood and feeling whole? Anne gave us the prescription. Mothers and housewives are the only workers who do not have regular time off. And if women were convinced that a day off or an hour of solitude was a reasonable ambition, they'd be finding a way of attaining it. First, we got to be convinced that a day off or an hour of solitude or rest is necessary, not just like a luxury. If you aren't convinced, nobody else will be either. Being a mother and caring for a household, not to mention if you also work outside of your home, which many, many of us do, is not regulated by any government agency. There are no labor laws to protect us from ourselves or our children. So we've got to do it ourselves, right? I'm convinced that we all have at least some people around us who actually want to give us this, but we're generally terrible at articulating what we need and want. So let's start by embracing some version of the thought, time off is not a luxury. It is the fuel for my best giving and highest self. If that thought doesn't create a feeling of nurturing for yourself, then find one that does. Write it down and put it where you can see it. Remember, our thoughts create our feelings, which create our actions. So choosing an intentional thought here matters big time. Remember how I completely changed my mothering by buying that placard that read, why don't I have it here? Best mom ever. This is what we're looking for, a total reframe. Think about the nurturing of spirit as water on clay. Jared, my husband, came up with this and I like it. So if the clay is dry, it's going to crack. It will be fragmented, right? But if you keep the clay whole, you can bend it and move it all kinds of ways, but it's still going to stay in one piece. Isn't that good? Here's another metaphor. I want you to visualize yourself as a big, deep well. The more water you pour into it, the more you have to give. We've all felt the contrast, right? The empty and overreactive mom that's annoyed with everyone and wants to run away, who then takes a 30-minute nap and suddenly, I'm freaking Mary Poppins over here. I can do anything. We want to make the relationship so clear between nurturing ourselves and nurturing others that it actually feels like the most practical and efficient way to approach our mothering. So now, what is the action to take? Is it just a nap? Is it reading a book? Sometimes it's going to be different for all of us, but most of us are terrible at not waiting until we're already in full Zerrissenheit, torn to pieceshood before we do. I remember thinking how nice it would be. This is a really weird confession, but I know I'm not alone in this. I remember thinking how nice it would be to get the flu just badly enough when my kids were little to have to go to the hospital, but not to really be sick, but just to have to go to the hospital so that I could rest there. Oh my gosh, I know I'm not the only one with that. We wait too long, right? Here's another quote from our girl, Ann. She says, many women hardly feel indispensable anymore, either in the primitive struggle to survive or as the cultural font of the home. No longer fed by a feeling of indispensability or purposefulness. And this is in 1955. We are hungry. And not knowing what we are hungry for, we fill up the void with endless distractions. This is pre-internet, you guys, pre-phones, pre-cell phones, unnecessary errands, compulsive duties, social niceties, and for the most part, to little purpose. Suddenly, the spring is dry, the well is empty. We don't want to just survive motherhood. We want to give purposefully. We don't want to be resentful martyrs. We don't want to play mothering whack-a-mole all day. We want to experience it with our kids and partners wholeheartedly. Okay, so this is where I fell down a serious rabbit hole. This is like version 3 or 4 of this episode. I started thinking about how in companies, you have some form of an HR department that creates the time off and boundaries for employees, and how nice it would be if moms had that, right? Even when I was running Solly Baby, there was time off. It's my own business, so it was still a little harder in that way. But overall, there were boundaries in the business way more than in my personal life. Seriously though, what if mothers had an HR department? Imagine walking into an office, not for your job, but for your life as a mother. And the sign on the door says, Human Resources for Moms or Human Resources for Elle. I actually started doing this. I had a spreadsheet. I worked on it for weeks of different departments, like different areas of an HR department for me. HR for Elle. So inside, you find different departments working for you. Recruitment, onboarding, employee relations, training, benefits, compliance, payroll, strategic planning, all the things that most workplaces have, except here, they're for your wholeness. Recruitment would ask, who are you letting into your inner circle? Which commitments are you saying yes to? Who do you need to say no to? Do they expand you or shrink you? It would help you hire support, therapists, babysitters, meal plans. It would remind you that who and what you let into your life matters. Onboarding would guide you into new seasons, welcoming a new baby, starting a new school year, entering midlife with rituals and compassion. Not just like for your kids back to school meal, for you, right? Offboarding would help you release what no longer serves, beliefs, habits, even identities, and you'd be allowed to say goodbye to those things with grace. Employee relations would mediate between your inner critic and your inner child. It would probably remind you to be the kind of mom in the way that you treat yourself that you want your daughter to be, because you're modeling that for her, right? And for our sons as well, how we want them to take care of themselves, to notice when we're being harsh with ourselves and say instead, you're allowed to rest. It's okay. Training and development would invest in your growth, your curiosity, your creativity, your imagination. It would hand you a book, a class, or even just a reminder to play, because the future does not come from the past. It comes from your imagination. So if you want an amazing future, you have to get more imaginative. Did I tell you that Okay, I told you I took this pretty far. I signed up, I tried a hip hop class, an adult hip hop class, which someone in my house, an unnamed teenager, said was kind of embarrassing. Not like they were embarrassed of me, but like the idea was embarrassing of an adult hip hop class, which obviously then I was like, well, yeah, sign me up for the whole year. I'll see you at the recital. Let's do this, right? But it was so fun. I felt so silly going in. I'm not a dancer, but I have loved watching my girls' hip hop classes. I'm like, this is fun. I don't want to go to a club. I just want to go to a hip hop class. I just want to learn. I just want to dance for a few minutes a week. It was so fun. But nobody was going to sign me up for that class but me. As my kids get older, I notice that like there, in theory, is more time. It never feels like that, but I know that there is. And I know that if I don't start reintroducing some of that creativity, some of these things for myself, nobody else is going to. And I also see how everyone benefits from it when I do. That source is fed, it's filled, and it just feeds out to everybody else. Benefits would make sure joy and rest aren't just afterthoughts. They'd be scheduled. Compensation would acknowledge the labor you give and make sure that you're replenished. It would say, oh yeah, you need that nap, right? Compliance would hand you a personal policy manual. What's okay, what's not. Boundaries in black and white. Oh my gosh, I want this manual. Payroll would track your energy like the currency that it is, reminding you to not overspend. It would check in with you like that Aura ring. You need to lay down, right? Strategic planning would zoom out and ask, who are you becoming? What kind of life are you building? And then the best part, you're not just the employee in this HR office, you're the CEO. You get to call the shots. And you have to, or else everybody else will, and you won't like their plan as much, I promise. Just like my Aura ring was telling me, I didn't actually need more rest or to take more naps. I mean, that's fine, but that's not really what I was needing. I was needing to come back to my own work, my own source. And it wasn't quiet, it was creation. It wasn't just quiet that I needed. It was creation. And this is what we miss. We think restoration means checking out, but sometimes it means checking in deeply to what is ours. So what do we do with all this? Are we just trying to avoid fragmentation? No, we're going to keep that clay hydrated so that we can be worked and moved and shifted, but stay together, keep some kind of wholeness. And sometimes we're just going to be torn to pieces. Life is just going to do that sometimes. We've all been there and we'll be there again. Let's remember that the antidote to that is coming back to source and feeding it, aligning with ourselves, aligning with something higher, and maybe setting up our own HR department. Okay, let me leave you with this. I want you to picture your own HR office. Which department needs the most attention right now? Is it recruitment, choosing what you say yes to, choosing what you say no to, training, investing in your growth, signing up for that class, reading that book? Is it benefits, scheduling joy, compliance, holding a boundary? Write one policy for yourself, tape it up where you'll see it. Let it remind you that your source matters, you matter, your wholeness matters, and don't be afraid to get pulled apart sometimes, right? That's a part of it. That's a lived in life and you're not doing it wrong. You're on your own mother's hero's journey. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that was useful in some way. And if it would be useful for someone else, please share it with a friend. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.